I'm Cher Wright. I'm a paranormal investigator. I run a group called Paranormal Sciences. I have been an investigator for more years than I care to claim. I am, all of my life I've had experiences with the paranormal, and most of my life my mother would tell me that I had a very active imagination. And so I was one of those people that, I kind of in a way hoped it was my imagination because I didn't know what to do with what I felt from that. And we lived in this little bitty house in this town in Alton, Illinois, which is right by St. Louis. When I was about 12, we moved to a new house in McPherson, Kansas. And any of you have been to Kansas, there's not much to see in Kansas. But we moved to this beautiful, huge two-story older house. My mother loved to restore old things. And we bought the second oldest house in the town. And it was part of the Underground Railroad. It was beautiful. And when we first got there, my mom and my dad and my sister needed to go into town to get the stove, the refrigerator, all the appliances and stuff. And somebody had to wait for the movers. And so the oldest, they elected me, which was cool because I didn't never see the house until that moment. And I was getting my own room, and it was so cool. And so I was looking around things. And I came downstairs, and I saw a man looking out the back window. And I started talking to him, and he had blue jeans on and a checkered shirt, and his hair kind of touched the collar, it was dark, wavy. I assumed he was the movers. I started speaking to him as a 12-year-old would, right? Hey, are you the movers? You got my stuff? I have my own room. Can you bring my stuff in first? I'm so excited. I've never had my own room before. It's got a real window in it and everything. And as he started to walk away, I followed him and chit-chatted as we went. So excited, like a little chihuahua jumping around. And we got to the threshold that went from the kitchen area to the living room, and he just disappeared. So he was as solid as you or I, but then he just was gone. At that moment, I decided to wait for the movers on the front porch. I did not want to be there anymore. So when my mother came home, I told her about it, and she said, "Oh, Cher, we've moved cross country. You haven't had a lot of sleep. It's your imagination, this kind of stuff." So I didn't really know what to do with that. And as we lived there for a while, more people saw him. More people experienced this man. We also experienced a lady upstairs, but she wasn't solid like the man downstairs. Often you would see her in the reflection of something else, such as looking out a window and you would see a reflection of another woman behind you. You would turn quickly and she'd be gone. Or if you were shutting the window or the medicine cabinet and you would see her for a brief moment and then she was gone. But nothing was ever negative. Nothing was ever that scary other than startling you. Eventually, my sister saw it, my dad saw it, and even my mother saw it, which at that point I said, "Mom, aren't you sure you're not too tired that, I got grounded at that point. I don't know about nowadays, so back then we weren't allowed to be smart. Hi, come on in, have a seat. So my mother was one day going into the attic, because she liked to explore every inch of the place that we had. And in the attic, she found this big library table that she restored. And we had that blow-in insulation, so it was all over everything, but she found all these journals. And in the journals, there were all sorts of stories, and sometimes some of them were just books from school. They were newspapers that were saved from pre-Civil War. They were selling people in the classifieds. It was interesting to see the history that I would have never even thought, as a 12-year-old, never really knew a lot of this stuff happened, but it made it very real. History was no longer dates and facts in my head. It now was a real thing, was tangible. Another thing that they found was this painting, and it was a large painting, and it was covered with that blow-in insulation. So she brought it down, and she started cleaning it up. And as she started cleaning it up, she, hi, come on in. No problem.
I'm in the wrong group.
Historical and ghosts?
No, Brittany.
Brittany?
Yeah, the girl takes care of the hearing people.
Oh, no, this is the Historical Society.
Where's she meeting tonight here, too?
Anyone know?
You'll have to go ask at the desk. Huh?
Yeah, okay. I thought she said, today's Tuesday, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I apologize. And so they brought this painting down, and they started cleaning it off slowly, and you could tell that it was a painting of the front of the house, which was kind of exciting because, we didn't know how old this painting was. And as she cleaned off more of it, you could see there was a family on the front porch of this house, and that man and that woman was in that picture. And so we had this tangible piece of history, this piece of a life event that matched the experiences that we were having in that home. And so it started my curiosity about spirits and ghosts. Until that point, spirits and ghosts were scary to me. They were how many of you grew up and watched Poltergeist on TV? Okay, Amityville. Okay, that was scary. This made it less scary. I didn't even know what to do with it at 12. And I thought that to be a ghost hunter or to study it, you had to have all these science degrees. Because watching those films, that's what they did. All these scientists with all this equipment walked in and came in and they studied the area. I didn't think I would ever be able to do that. So as I grew up, I just started reading as many stories and books as I could. And as you do that, you meet other people that have the same interests. And I started getting into groups, and then went from that to statewide groups and held leadership positions and officer positions, and learned as much as I could, networked with other groups, and continually to study. And then I finally decided to create my own group. And that has grown and evolved even with that. And so that became Paranormal Sciences. Now, in Paranormal Sciences, we have a few, building blocks, I would say, the foundation of Paranormal Sciences. We are education-based, which means that not just that we teach and go out and educate the public about ghost hunting and what it is and what it isn't, but also that we learn from everything we do, or we try to. Everybody in our group is on different levels of talent, and so we all get to learn from each other, and we get to learn from the experience of teaching others. You should be a lifelong learner. Everything you do, you should learn something from. So we're very education-based. We are evidence-based, and that would mean that we don't go into a place that's old and falling down and say, oh, it must be haunted because it's old and falling down and creepy, right? We want to go in and say, why is this place haunted? Who is it haunted by? Well, there's only one way to figure that out, and that's by historical research. You need to know when you experience things, how you take those experiences, those paranormal experiences, and then research that and go back and find out, what do these things mean? Who were these people? The past was only someone else's present at one time. And so we have to look back and uncover those clues. And we do something called the historical method. And this is something I've coined myself. What we like to do is we go to a place, and we go there often, and we try to really look at the experiences that are happening and isolate the different activity. Now, there are different types of hauntings, and one is an intelligent haunting and one is a residual haunting. Lots of different phenomena in each type of category. But in the residual haunting, that's more like an imprint, an energy. You're not necessarily getting a real spirit out of this. It is something that has imprinted on the location. As if you're seeing a video and it's playing in a loop over and over again. So it doesn't ever really change, other than it might fade, it might increase, but the action is always the same. So you might see a woman walk down a hallway, disappear, like as if she went right through a wall. Maybe one time, a long time ago, there was a doorway there, but the house has changed, or the location has changed. The woman never gets off path, and the woman never stops and talks to you. The woman never even acknowledges that you're there. But this happens maybe at the same time every night. Maybe it's on the same day of the year every year. But whatever it is, it doesn't change and it doesn't interact. And that would be residual. It's as if you took a video, popped it in there, and just hit that loop and it played over and over and over again. As much as we try, watch a movie, we yell at the screen, they don't really interact back. Now, the intelligent haunting, those are the ones that are really cool, because those are the ones that do interact with you. Those are the ones we get the EVP, the electronic voice phenomena, where the voices talk with us. That's when we can really interact with that spirit. Both of which we have to isolate and get clues from the activity itself, and then try to decide what caused this haunting. Who was this person in life? Why is it still there? And so we take that, we go back into our libraries and into our historical societies and maybe the town historian, and we start asking questions. And we try to find out and piece together maybe a bio of that person. And then find out from there maybe why they're still lingering. And if that spirit is just lingering, maybe something that can help them move on. Because our fascination with this isn't the creepy side of ghost hunting. It's more of the direct connection with the history, the direct connection with the past, the people who lived then. Because learning from them is how we're going to learn about ourselves. And so, as disappointing as that makes for Hollywood, it's actually very fascinating for us that are actually exploring the paranormal. One of the locations that we've gone there since 2005. The first year we went probably 4 times in 2005, and we got nothing. All 4 times, other than being extremely cold because there's no electricity and no heat in this building. But you had a feeling something was there. It just wasn't uncovering it. The next year we went, we started getting little things, little experiences. Again, 4 to 5 times that year. All of a sudden, at one point, 2 women were talking. And on the recorder, a 3rd woman starts talking who wasn't there. And she says, the lady in the water, she's drowning. She's cold. And of course, they didn't hear this at the time. They were just chit-chatting away because they weren't actually investigating at the moment. They were taking a break. And they went on to another room and they said, wow, I wonder what this place was. And you hear the 3rd lady say, well, it was a hotel, but in 65. And then she fades off. A little later, they're looking at some artifacts in this museum. The lady picks up the artifact. She says, I wonder what this is, a pipe? And you hear another lady say, it's a rattle. It happened to be a carved baby rattle out of wood. The woman was a little perturbed, but she thought it was a pipe. But there was this 3rd woman, almost like a tour guide, walking around. Now this place, the history's kind of neat at this place. It started off as a bunkhouse for ice harvesters. And when the lake would freeze over, they would harvest the ice and they'd send it to Chicago for the meat packing plants. When that kind of died out a little bit, a family saw the building, bought it, and decided we're going to make a hotel out of it. But we don't like where it's at, so when the ice froze over, when the lake froze over, they hitched up a team of horses and a truck and pulled it across the lake. And they moved it to the other side. Then they built onto it and they made it a bed and breakfast hotel type thing. And it stayed a hotel through the early 1900s and past World War II. It was a very interesting location because you have people coming and going. And we've experienced spirits that come and go. It's not always the same people. Now there are some that are the same. We were able to isolate a few. One of the spirits we've isolated is this gentleman named Roscoe. Roscoe was a bartender, and he had a bar, but the bar wasn't actually in the hotel at the time when it was a hotel. The bar was in another location, and when that location was sold off, they moved his bar to this location. He seemed to come with it. Roscoe likes women. He likes women a lot, and often we get EVP of him making sexist remarks. Pretty much however you were in life, you're going to be like this in death. So if you were a prankster, when you've passed on, you're probably going to be a little bit more of a prankster because you know what's going to happen to you, right? You're going to get caught? No. If you were a sweet and lovable person, you're probably going to be a sweet and lovable, helpful person on the other side as well. If you were a not very social person, chances are we're not even going to run into you because you're going to avoid us, right? So it's kind of neat. But as we've investigated there, every time we come, we get more and more. We've even got EVP of when we start that, a woman saying, I love it when they do this. Now, we don't really understand hauntings completely. It could be many, many things. People that don't want to pass over. Some people feel, one of the theories is that people stick around because they have unfinished business to do. They don't know they've passed. One of the ones that I kind of take to as well is that maybe in every belief system we have a judgment at the end before you move on. And some people may just be afraid of that judgment. It may be something that they feel guilty for that they really don't need to feel so guilty for. Maybe a woman who had an infidelity. Maybe a person who had an argument with a loved one, the mother-in-law is passed and they don't want to face that person. Who knows? Sometimes we're really hard on ourselves and we can't forgive ourselves. when nobody else even remembers the altercation. And so, afraid of that last judgment may keep people here too. Other times it's because they're watching after the people who left here. We had a case a few years back. There was a young man that was haunting a location. And he was a very troubled young man, and he committed suicide. And he was there because he wanted to tell his mom he was sorry. He really didn't mean to. That had come to find out, and they found this out later by finding notes that he had left that no one could find. It wasn't suicide, it was drug overdose. He didn't mean to. He just was living a hard life. So though they thought it was suicide, or they labeled it, he really didn't commit suicide. And so he was worried that his mother wouldn't forgive him. And of course she does, she loves him. And so these are things that sometimes people stick around for. So we have to figure out why they're here. We need to know how this works. Another idea with hauntings is that there's a dimensional shift. How many of you have ever seen the movie The Others? Okay, so while we watch the first part of the movie and we think that the woman and her children are being haunted by spirits, we find out that the woman and the children are haunting the living. And they can't tell the difference. They don't really know that. Now imagine you're a spirit, let's say, and you were in early 1800s. And you see me kind of not really there, and I have a piece of equipment, and that equipment's glowing red, so I'm glowing red. Imagine how frightening that might be. Do you think they're going to go, hey, how you doing? I'm here. No, I don't think so. They're probably going to say, I don't know what's going on here, but we need to get a priest or something. It's crawling with people. So we have to really think about the psychological part of this. We may be just as frightening to them. A lot of people think of ghosts when they get frightened themselves. They think it's creepy, it's crawling. How many of you had that thought? Ghosts are kind of scary, okay? Look around. Do all of you know everybody here? Have you met some of the people here? No? Have you met this man sitting right next to you?
Unfortunately.
You have? Okay.
He scares me the
He
most.
scares you the most? Have you met the ladies behind here? No. Are you afraid of them?
Maybe.
Is all these people real or?
They may be, but I'm not 100% sure. The thing is that we don't even think twice about that. We go to the mall and people are walking around us. And the only time we really think about that is when we're going to our car in the dark. Otherwise, when we're walking around the mall, it's not something we even think about. And someone in the flesh or in the living has just as much ability to hurt us, if not more. And we're never scared or creeped out by that. People that pass on and our spirits, they were people. And so why would we go immediately to the dark and creepy and evil side? Most people are good-natured, most of them. Often, if you think everybody's negative, it's probably because you're negative, right? Not necessarily something that is a thing where you say, well, everybody's mean. Well, that's either because, you have been mean to them, they're kind of staying away from you, or because you're so incredibly sensitive that you take everything incorrectly, right? Most people are fairly good-natured. Can't trust everybody. I mean, that's a little silly in this day and age. But for the most part, we aren't here to hurt each other. It's the spirit world. You got to think about that as well. They're not really here to hurt us, but it's something we don't understand. And when we don't understand something, then fear is there. And when fear is there, then we also don't understand because it gets in the way. We don't think clearly when we have fear, right? How many of you watched a scary movie or slasher movie ever? How many of you, after watching that, has to go outside and take the trash out? Okay, yeah, a couple of you. Is it the same as it had been every other time? No, every little crack. Yeah, you're afraid it's there, right? It could just be a cat, but now it's Bigfoot, right? You don't know. I mean, because your imagination starts to get, fear takes over, and then it becomes bigger and bigger, and we start making things out of it. We make things bigger than what it needs to be, right? Do you have a question, sweetheart?
Sometimes you can see things and then pretend that something's there and then be afraid.
Exactly. And once we're afraid, then we start thinking about it more, right? You know, I can't tell you how many times as a child I was afraid to look under my bed. My mother said because I've never cleaned anything, but, you know, you see those movies where the person reaches up and grabs the person's mouth, yeah. That is creepy. Things that I'm afraid of the most when I'm ghost hunting, believe it or not, the biggest fear I have is that I'll be sprayed by a skunk. We go to a lot of places that that's abandoned or people aren't living there, and what happens when things are left alone, but they're animals, right? Now, if I come across a possum or a raccoon, they might growl at me. If I back off, then they're fine. But if I startle a skunk, I'm going to feel that for a while. And probably nobody's going to ride home with me. So that's one of my biggest fears when I'm ghost hunting. It's not the spirit or the ghost. It's that I'm going to get sprayed by a skunk. So when I hear little footsteps off to the side, you know, I'm like, is that a skunk? And then they laugh at me. So there are different things that we look at differently, I guess. Everything with the spirit world, it's our perception of things. And perception can make us feel differently about a situation than we need to. For instance, how many of us have ever procrastinated something because of a confrontation? We don't worried about going and maybe confessing something that we did. Maybe as a child we broke something we don't want to tell mom about, or when we hide it, you know. Other things, when you have to go, my biggest thing is when I know that it's time for me to put in my 2 weeks notice. I don't want to do that because I don't want to hurt the boss's feelings. Silliness, because he wouldn't worry about hurting my feelings if he didn't need me anymore, right? But I procrastinate that. A friend that is being a little too needy, and I have to confront that sometimes. That happens. Or them getting mad because I don't have time to do something because my life is busy too, but they can't see that, and I have to confront that issue. Well, in my mind, I'm playing it over. Well, if I say something, then they're going to get upset. When they get their feelings hurt, they're going to be upset, and then there's going to be this big confrontation, and in my mind, I've blown it up. And sometimes I just have to go, you know, hey, you realize I got all these public speaking things? And then they go, oh, I'm sorry, I was being insensitive. Something as simple as that, but I made it into this big thing from my own fears. When we do the things with ghost hunting, I think that's what happens a lot of times. We start seeing a shadow that goes by, and it might have just been because a car went by and cast a shadow, but we've now seen a shadow, and now we think it's this or this or this, and it gets bigger. And now our fear has taken over. So we have to work on keeping our fear under check. We have to look at it like an exploration. How many of you remember science class when you were kids? Right? Ask a question, identify the problem, do experiments, collect the data, write the hypothesis, all those steps. When we do the ghost hunting thing, it's the same thing. But part of that data collection isn't just going out in the field and saying, is there someone here? Could you touch me? You see that on TV all the time now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's this much. But part of it is that behind the scenes thing, the research part, where we come here and look it up. And a lot of us, it's hard to find those really good investigators because many people want to go out in the field and experience the stuff, but not a lot want to go back to the libraries and start going through all the archives, because even though there's a ton of stuff on the internet, not everything's there. You have to actually read once in a while. That's really incredibly a bother to people who are younger. It's like they don't want to actually go through archives and read. And that's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, actually, it's very interesting. It's a long process, but you learn a lot of other things.
You do learn a lot about other things, and a lot of, you come across a lot of things. How many of you have been out ghost hunting before? Anybody? Two of you? Yes. Where'd you go?
Well, I've run into it on accident before,
Yeah.
but I've gone to a cemetery. I've gone to a cemetery where there was a church that was burned down,
Okay.
and I had a friend trying to do the paper in the dark.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Where they talk and hopefully it writes on the paper their answer.
Okay. Yeah.
That was in the others too, but nothing ever came of that.
Okay.
But my experiences have always been accidental.
Just accidental.
Yeah.
Any part of a group or anything? You've just gone out on your own?
Oh, no groups or anything, just me and my friends have accidentally seen something, or I live in a house where someone committed suicide.
Okay.
Um,
They're there.
Yeah, my mom's genealogical research, so I do look into archives.
Genealogies,
Oh,
really
no.
fascinating.
I don't read much, but I do look into archives.
Oh, are you kidding me?
I'm telling you, I think you gave me your demon and your, my phone.
Okay, sorry. Who else here? I know that you said that you are, but you've gone out with us. Ma'am, yes, you?
When I go to work.
When you go to work? Yeah. Have you done any research to find out who the person might be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Essentially, we can find out whether he's going to just by going through some paperwork
Yeah.
or a recent death or something like that. My
Okay.
work is a retirement home, so
Okay,
since
yeah.
I've worked there, there's been approximately 200 deaths.
Okay.
And sometimes they do linger, and they like to play jokes,
Sometimes.
and they like to move things around.
I've done some volunteer work at some nursing homes, mostly the Vets Home in Lafayette, and, you know, they haven't passed on, but they still like to play jokes, so
Yes.
I can imagine once they pass on, they'll be much the same.
Well, we've actually seen the apparitions we tried to trap, and we never did catch them.
I think we have more people joining. What is it here? What you got?
Sometimes, like if you're writing down something,
Yes.
and then you just looked away for a second, and then you were stuck, and then you could do one thing,
Yeah.
and then you were finished, and then when you turn back, it was already done.
Wow, I haven't had that happen. That's kind of cool though. I would like that to happen, like with my dishes. If I turn around and go, that'd be really cool. I would like one of those helpful ghosts, you know? And it never seems to happen that way though. I do have a woman in my house, and she doesn't like people to fight in the kitchen. When you start arguing, and I have 2 teenage daughters, so we have argued in my house before. When you start to argue, pots and pans kind of fall, things happen. And I didn't really talk about this much. We moved there quite a while back, and we had a lot of weird little things happening. My husband, who is the king of all skeptics, you know, spirits do not exist unless one walks up and smacks him in the face. And even if that happens, he'd probably say there's a reasonable explanation for that. And there's absolutely no way he's going to believe that a spirit is there. But even him experiencing some of this stuff goes, I don't have an explanation. It's not a ghost, but there's no explanation for this. So little things would happen where the trash can lid, you know, the kind that swings, that'll just start swinging on its own for no reason. Doorknobs get jingled. My daughter, when we first moved in, she was quite a bit younger. She's turning 15 now, but she was little. It was the first time she had her own room. And she kept telling me that there was a little girl in the room and that she was keeping her up at night. She was very tired. And that little girl would jump on her bed or sit in her chair. I kept telling her, you know, it's the first time she's had her own room, so she's probably just imagining it, waking up from a dream. And so we didn't really tell anybody anything. And I have a friend who, she's an older woman, and she also is a bit sensitive, which I don't know that I bought into it so much. I mean, she's a friend of mine, but, you know, when it comes to people who are psychic, I'm one of those people like, show me, don't tell me, kind of thing. And she's never said, hey, I'm psychic, but I hear a lot of other people talking about it. But I'm just like, whatever. Well, she came over, and you know how when you have a new home, you do the tour. Here's the bedroom, here's the bathroom, this kind of thing. As soon as she walked into my daughter's room, she said, oh, there's a little girl here that really likes this purple chair. And she jumps from the purple chair to the bed. And she describes her, and Ashley, of course, is like, see, Mom, see? It's kind of interesting because I've never told her anything about that. But in my kitchen, she says, there's a woman here, and she likes you. But she wants you to know it's her house, not yours. And if you can live with that, then she's okay with you being here. I'm like, fine, your house, not mine. I'm okay with it. And ever since then, we've had less problems. But she does not like anybody to argue in her kitchen. Kitchen is off limits to argue with. But it's interesting there. We live in Hebron. There's no trains in Hebron now, but we've heard train whistles going through. Just what sounds like it's in our house, but they're not. We've had interesting. You will hear a child playing a xylophone, which is, I think, is probably the creepiest sound when you don't have children in the house like that. It's really weird. But it's interesting, and we're trying to figure out what has happened. One of the things that, when we moved in, I'm one that likes to go through and clean everything, you know, washing baseboards and walls before I move my own stuff in. So I move all of our stuff in, and I'm also one of those people that purge when I move. You know, if I haven't used it in a year, it goes out. I don't want to bring anything in the house that I haven't used in a year because it's time for it to go. So I purge everything I have. Well, we did that. We moved in. Everything was cleaned. Everything was purged. Everything was organized and in its space. Doesn't necessarily stay that way, but it starts off that way. We started finding notes laying around the house. Not from any of us or to any of us, but they were between a boy and a girl. And they were like a childhood note, like, do you like me? Check yes or no. This kind of stuff. And we started finding them in the oddest places. We would find them tucked under a mattress. We would find them in a drawer, pushed like where it was kind of caught. Different things like that. And I know they weren't there, but we're finding these things. They weren't incredibly old. So it was kind of interesting. But the story of it was cool. And so for me, I like stories, right? So I'm thinking, well, this is a really neat thing. And then there would be an answer. Yes, I like you. Do you want to hold hands? These kind of things. It went back and forth for a while. But you know, it stopped. And once it stopped, all the letters disappeared. We couldn't find them. We were keeping them together, but then they just was gone. It was the oddest thing. And then I'm thinking, well, am I losing my mind? Did I just imagine this the whole time? But no, I had other witnesses to it. But it was a really kind of crazy thing. So the paranormal could be what we see on TV, right? The whole creepy, crawly, give you goosebumps and nightmare stuff. But it also could be this interaction of things that we just don't understand. So we have to, again, take it out of the box and think about it. Some of the different types of hauntings, there's one called a visitation haunting. And a visitation haunting usually happens, you'll hear lots of stories about that, such as that I had a dream, my mother came to me, she said she loved me and I would be fine. And then I found out the next morning that she died. Those kind of things happen. Those are visitations. Sometimes they happen on anniversaries of things that happen. Sometimes they happen just when the person needs comforting. And sometimes it happens as a saying goodbye kind of thing. I've had a visitation experience myself. Has anyone else had a visitation experience here? Kathy? Would you like to share yours, Mom?
Okay. My mother died, and on the anniversary of her death, 7 years later, what was it? Did someone knock at the door?
It's the doorbell.
The door. Oh, that's right. The doorbell rang at about 10 at night, which I thought was kind of odd. And I think my husband was in the bedroom, and I ran to get him because I didn't want to answer the door at 10 at night. And there was no one there. And he went out and looked all around, and there was no one there. And then a week later, I think you were over, it happened again, the doorbell rang again, and no one was there. I think it happened like 3 times. The first time was on the anniversary of my mom's death.
Wow, that's pretty interesting, actually. And sometimes you see them, and sometimes you don't see them in a visitation haunted. I had a great aunt, Flossie. She was my life when I was little. She had no children of her own, so guess who got spoiled? I grew up on her lap. She had the most interesting smell. She wore Chantilly. Anybody know what Chantilly perfume smells like? And Absorbing Junior. It's unique. For those of you who don't know what Absorbing Junior is, it is a really, really strong Bengay-ish scent. Like make your eyes water kind of thing. So she had a unique smell. And I don't know if she used the Chantilly to try to overpower it, but it was pretty strong that too. She died when I was 6. And I was devastated. But as with life, you go on. And while at first you cry and cry and cry. And then as you get older, you think less and less of the person and you move on. And it gets to the point when you become an adult that you don't think about your 6-year-old tragedy in your life with your great Aunt Flossie. And you've moved on and other things have happened. Well, as an adult, it was probably at least 10 years ago, I went to visit my mom and stepdad. And while on the phone at my mother's house, I heard a crash. My stepdad had fallen in the bathroom. My mom had fallen in the bathroom too, so she talked on the phone all the And he fell into the phone. He had a heart attack. I had heard it through the phone. When I did hear it, I threw the phone and went to go check on him. I did CPR. We couldn't find the phone because I couldn't remember what I did with it because I just threw it. So we couldn't call paramedics right away. She had to find the phone. She had to hang up the phone because I didn't hang it up. And when paramedics finally got there 45 minutes later, he never regained consciousness. A lot of things went through my mind. Did I do CPR correctly? If I had hung up the phone or kept the phone with me and called right away, would they have got here in time? And I had a lot of guilt with it. I suffered a lot with that. And when I came home after the funeral and taking care of my mother for a couple of weeks, she lives in Southern Illinois and I live up here. I was on my bed crying and sobbing because I really loved him. He was my stepdad, but he was my dad. And he was amazing, and I didn't know how I was ever going to not hurt anymore. And all around me, I smelled Chantilly and Osmark Jr., and I felt comforted, and I was okay. Fast forward a little bit further, and sometimes a visitation happens with a medium or a psychic. That's true and good. I don't put a lot of stock in that, like I said. My sister, who lives in St. Louis, a friend of hers said, hey, I got to go to this gathering with my friends, this party, and I don't have a ride. So my sister was just going to drop her off and give her a ride. When she got there, she didn't know that they were having one of those psychic parties. You have the psychic and everybody pays money and go. And some lady who already paid for her session couldn't make it because she got called into work or something. So they said, well, there's no refund, so why don't you take her spot? So she said, okay. And he walked over to her and he says, your father is here. And she kind of giggled. She doesn't believe in psychics that much either. And she says, my father's still alive. Because our father is. He goes, well, this guy says he's your dad. And he says you got to tell them that it didn't matter about the phone because I was dead before it hit the floor. That is undeniable. That's not a vague piece of information, and I needed to hear that because it alleviated a lot of guilt. So I believe the spirit world is real. How many of you here believe in ghosts? More than half. Good portion of you. How many of you do not believe in ghosts? Couple. And that's okay. Skeptics keep us grounded. If we all just believed in ghosts and believed in spirits, we could believe anything. We need those skeptics to say, wait a minute, and ask those questions. Dorothy's trying to open, it's haunted too. So we need those skeptics in our lives to keep us grounded, to make us think and believe what, and move past what our own feelings are about the subject, to keep us asking those questions and searching for those answers. And we can't just stop at, I think I saw a ghost. Did we really? Why is it haunted? And what is their story? What is their connection to us? Because any time, just like tonight, you've met me for the first time, some of you have met me before, but this is a human relationship. You're going to take parts of this away from tonight, and all of you will probably have a different view of who I am. Most of you are going to say she definitely moves like a Muppet. But hopefully that aside, some of you will say I had a really good time and I learned something. Some of you will say it was interesting and I would like to learn more. That's the biggest thing I hope for. I want to inspire you to learn more about the subject. Don't just watch the TV shows. Got to remember the TV shows, that's for entertainment. Because how many of you have been fishing? Ghost hunting is very much like fishing. Throw your lure in and sit and be quiet and wait and get in trouble by your dad when you're being too loud because you're scaring the fish away. And sometimes you pull in a fish. Most of the times you don't. And so you really have to then do some research to find out what kind of bait is going to work. You have to try different things. And so it's very much like that. It's not interesting like it is on TV all the time. On TV, they seem to always get something and then there's commercial breaks and it's all wrapped up in an hour, right? How many times have you watched and saw somebody taking notes during the time you're investigating? Probably not. How do they remember what happened and who was where? How many of you have seen that someone go, did you just see that? And just off camera, there's something. Now imagine, each one of them, those teams have a handheld camera, right? And then you've got a camera crew following them from different angles. How can anything happen off camera? Everything's covered. On top of it, they have those static cameras where they put in different places, and it's covering all these areas. It's buyer beware. They're entertaining and they're cool. I like the ones that tell a good story. Because whether or not they reenact it, I still get the story, right? So you gotta think about that. We make a joke sometimes, to be a ghost hunter, you have to have a goatee and you have to be bald-headed. Yes, ma'am?
Can you tell me anything about orbs?
Orbs, yes. Most orbs in cameras, when you take a photo, everybody know what she's talking about, okay? Most orbs in cameras are contamination. Most of them are dust or moisture or pollen. To be a real spirit orb, it has to have something more. It will need to either cast its own light, so you'll see light underneath it. It will need to maybe have mass, so you might see a shadow underneath it. But oftentimes, it's just the trajectory of the flash and the lens being so close together on the camera that it creates a reflection from the dust, the moisture, the pollen, different types of contaminations with it.
Well, now I don't believe it.
Well, that's okay.
Our daughter was married, and they lived in, her and her husband lived in his grandmother's home.
Mm-hmm.
Dearly loved his grandmother, and he had a mentally and physical disabled sister.
Okay.
Lived to be 16. She was very bad shape. He loved her really. And I gave my daughter a camera, and she started taking pictures around the place and all. And there was these two orbs by Lyndon all the time. I mean, they was up there, nighttime, all the time, these two orbs. So I said, well, you know, maybe it needs work on. So she went and had it cleaned. She had everything checked out and did it again. She bought a new camera, and it did it. These two orbs. They went to Maine. She bought another camera. Bought another camera, and they was out in the park of a night, and there's these two orbs. So she talked to Richard Crowe, who he is.
I've met him before.
Yeah, we have to. And he thought, he says, who has passed on that is dearly loved by him? And she said his grandmother and his sister. And he says, it's got to be them, because she took the pictures to him.
Okay. Now, when I'm explaining this thing, most of the orbs they won't be there every time. Now, that's not a piece of information I had. I only had part of the picture that you were asking.
Yeah.
You asked me what I thought about orbs.
Yeah.
And the majority of them are these things. Now, when you add certain things, we talk about layering evidence. You've watched crime shows on TV? Yeah. You don't walk into a place and go, oh, there's blood on the floor, I know who did it, right? You have to take all the evidence into effect and create your case to decide what's going on. Now, if you had said, every picture he's in, there's these two orbs, always there. That's a little bit more than when I have a picture, I have an orb here, sometimes I have it there, you know what I mean? And so a lot of times when people take photos, they'll see an orb here, and the next picture there's nothing there. And then or it'll move, which dust will move, things like that. So there are cases where the orbs are spirit orbs. They're few and far between though. Most cases, it's contamination. Usually people get these orbs out on a dusty road near a cemetery.
All three cameras.
No, she says yours is all right.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out why these, why these orbs were bigger. Could it be if the grandma and
It may be, and maybe he could tell them that it's okay to move on. Maybe they're there to watch over him. Maybe he's holding on to them.
and they're also in their house. They move things around.
And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we have to say it's okay. For instance, anybody said, how many of you have worked like in hospice or anything like that? Okay. How many cases have you seen where the person hangs on, and it seems like when the person goes out, the loved one goes out for coffee, that's when the person passes, or not necessarily with them. They don't want to do it in front of them, they don't want to hurt them, right? Or sometimes they hang on until the person says, you know what, it's okay. I love you, but it's okay to go, and that's when it happens. Sometimes we look for permission to do so because we have so much personal responsibility to our loved one, even though we're in pain and we're suffering, we don't move on. And so maybe if he, he could take that moment and say, it's okay. You guys move on. It's better there,
That might work.
and maybe then you'll have peace too.
That'd be probably work with Linda. Yeah.
So, there are different things, like I said, lots of different theories when it comes to spirits. We try to take those theories and test them in the field and see what works and what doesn't. It's difficult sometimes because it's not an exact science, as you know. If you can recreate it, it's usually not paranormal. So, for instance, if I take a picture of a shadow and I can recreate the shadow of myself, we once had a person say, I caught a ghost, and they give me this picture, and there is a shadow, but the shadow looks like this. Okay, you just caught your shadow. So we sometimes get excited, and we have to look at it a little bit. One of the guys who come out and he takes classes for me, he's a really nice guy, I really like him. And his first ever ghost hunt, we were in a cemetery, right? All of a sudden, he comes running through the cemetery. He's yelling, run, run, run. I'm like, what the heck, So everybody goes to their car. This is in a group that I did not, it wasn't my group, this group that we were in together a long time ago, and then I had split off. But he was so afraid. And we get to our cars, and he's like, what? We didn't know, is there some bear over there or something? What's going on? You don't run from bears, by the way. But he said there was a ghost over there, which then, of course, all of us kind of chuckled because we're kind of looking for that. We don't want to run from it. And he says, I got the picture. He's going through his camera. And he gets to the one, he was like, see, and we're looking. It was the statue of Mary in the back of him. But it was dark. It was his first time ever. And he saw this white reflection when the flash come. And in his eye, it didn't look like the statue. It just kind of looked like a form. So he was pretty sure it was a ghost. And it kind of freaked him out a little. But since then, he's done a lot better. And I give him credit all the time. Even though you were that afraid, you remembered to snap a picture before you took off running. We have a few rules. Number one is never run. If you run through a graveyard, there's little tombstones. You're probably going to trip and fall. Safety first. Another rule we always have is always get permission. Never ever go somewhere where you don't have permission. How many of you live out rurally? What happens when you hear a coyote out there? Some of you get guns and shoot them, right? If I'm tromping through your backyard without permission, how much do I sound like a coyote out there? Right? So we always have to get permission. You never know. There was a girl in Ohio back in 2005 with 2 high school girls. There was this cemetery and this old house, creepy old house that the people lived in. It was right next to it. And teenagers all the time going into these cemeteries because it was rumored haunted. The man and his mother lived there, and they were really tired of hearing the giggling and the screaming and the partying and the cars coming by and everything, all hours of the night. The man wasn't all that stable. No one really understood how unstable he was. One night, these 2 high school girls, senior girls, got out of their car, and they're giggling and laughing. They're going to investigate. And he decided to shoot in the air above them to scare them. Only he didn't. He shot one of the girls in the head. She recovered, but she will never be able to do anything for herself again. So one night of thrills cost her her whole future. If she was in a place that was safe and she had permission, that would not have happened. So we always stress, you have to get permission. You can't go skulking around places because, you never know what will happen. You got to be safe. Safety is number one. We always say stick with your group. Because hunting ghosts is fun, but hunting people is not. If I have to go find you, that's probably not fun for me. And everybody else has to hold still while I go find you. So our rules are there to make sure that we all have a good time, we learn something, and we come back safely. You don't think about those things that that can happen, but I mean, people live out there in the middle of nowhere, you go out on some bridge, but the bridge is always part of somebody else's property. You know, we can't trespass, can't break those laws. You know, another thing, if you've seen the little IR temperature things, they look like guns. Police officers do not like to see those in your hand in the dark with a little red laser light that comes on things. Police officers aren't real fond of that either. So you must always have permission, put down your equipment, speak to the police officer, give them your ID, explain that you have permission, give them the name of the person who you have permission. We always call the police also and tell them we're here from this time to this time, even when we came out to historical societies that are there with us. One of the places in Cedar Lake, the historical people come out and sit with us while we do our investigation. We are right next to the police station. You park in the police station's parking lot, and yet we still call them and say, by the way, we're over here. Don't get freaked out that this building has lights going through it all of a sudden, you know, because they might come in thinking there's a burglar, right? So they know. We have to make sure people are aware. Are there any questions?
Do you use any kind of machinery?
We use a lot of different devices. Most of what you've seen on TV, EMF detectors, which is electromagnetic fields, most everything gives off electromagnetic fields. There are two theories with that. One is that spirits are attracted to electromagnetic field, to energy, and that they feed off that energy. The other is that they put off that energy, and we're really not sure which that happens. So sometimes you'll get these fields that'll pop up for no reason. One reason, you know, you hear a lot of times the questions are, why do you turn off the lights and everything? Well, we're trying to get rid of as much power that's normal and natural to see if we hit those spikes that aren't, so we can trace that down. So we use that. We use different kinds of audio recorders. Anything that will record audio will record EVP, electronic voice phenomena. We use temperature gauges, IR, cameras, video, photo. We use all sorts of different thermal imaging at times, but that you got to be careful with because thermal imaging cameras have to be calibrated every so often, and it costs $500 just to open it, let alone have it calibrated. So if it's not calibrated, then it's not accurate, and how do we know it's a spirit, right? Plus, if I'm leaning on the wall on this side and you have a thermal imaging camera on the other, you're going to see a figure. So you need to know where your people are if you're going to use that stuff too. There's a lot of different technology. Most of the technology that's out there is not made for ghost hunting, but we've adapted it to use it for that. So it's not a proven science. So yeah, there's a lot of different little things that go in. Personally, me, I don't like to use any equipment for myself. I like just to document and observe. That's my favorite thing to do. If I have any equipment on me, it's usually, I have this thing called a mel-temp. It has an EMF detector and a temperature gauge on it together, and then an audio recorder. And that's usually the two things I'll use other than pen and paper. I don't like using flashlights. How many of you seen the little headlamp flashlights they strap on here? I hate those things because if I have a headlamp on and I go, hey, did you see that? What happened?
Blind.
You can't see a thing. You've now been blinded. So, you know, those are outlawed. Don't like those at all. Another thing we do is, you know, with the regular cameras, people have flash on them, and I ask that someone say flash before they actually take a photo, and that helps people like know that's going to happen, so they don't look at the flash, and that helps everybody but me because as soon as you say flash, I turn to you and go, huh? So yeah, different things. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any certain thing you use in cemeteries, or you just mostly observations?
Same things. You'll take temperature readings. You'll take video. We've had video happen where a ball of red energy has formed and then dissipated. We'll use our audio recorders. We've gotten voices. We were at a cemetery one time that had that often gets vandalized. And we had an older lady, you could hear it had an English, I think, English or Irish accent you could hear, but she said, they broke the bloody fence down. So, I mean, she wasn't too happy about it either. But yes, we'll use anything we use inside, outside, but on the outside one, like a cemetery or any kind of outdoor location, you're gonna need someone to really be good at documenting because every car that goes by, you have to document that. Any other outside thing, like dogs barking or something going on, you're going to have somebody documenting those things because it creates contamination for your scene. So, and another thing too, you know, at the time, a car goes by the road, right? And so you write down, the car went by 7:25 p.m. Well, later on we're reviewing video and this mist comes up, half the time the car went by, it could have been dust. You know what I mean? So we have to, that helps us rule out contamination and false positives, as we put it, things that look like spirits that really aren't. And ma'am, you had something?
Yeah. Where was your most memorable haunting?
Oh, well, locally, Cedar Lake, Lake of the Red Cedars, really neat place. I really like this place called Prospect Mansion in Trinway, Ohio. It was pre-Civil War. A man built it for his second wife because the first wife died and he got remarried. And she did not want a house, to live in the house his first wife had, and she wanted a grander house. So he had to build one twice as big as what she had. And so he built this big, beautiful 5-story home. Yes. And actually what had happened is the night before they were supposed to move in, the contractor burnt it down, thinking that he would get paid to rebuild it. But they found out that he did it. It was arson. He went to jail. So someone else rebuilt it. When they did that, they built it with the floors supposed to be 2 foot thick, so that if there was ever a fire, the whole house wouldn't go. So he lived there with his children from the first wife and then children from the second wife as well. And they had lots of parties. They were very high society. They ran it kind of like a plantation, but they were not slaves. This is Ohio. And so what they did, a few things had happened. One night, they did lots of parties. Like I said, this is late 1800s at this time. And between 1860 and the end of that century. And they would do these very elaborate parties. Well, one of the daughters, she was a young adult at that time, had a fever and wasn't feeling well. And so she was up in her room, and she went out to get some air, and she fell off the balcony and died. The mother couldn't part with her body, and so she had her body brought down to the basement where they had the ice and they kept their meat, and kept the body there till she could part with it. So the body stayed there a while. And often you will catch a glimpse of the daughter out, in that window where she had fallen. And other times you will hear and feel of the mother mourning in the basement. So that's kind of an interesting thing. It was part of the Underground Railroad. They hid lots of slaves. They had this cupola at the top. It's all glass, small room. They could go out and look around for miles and miles. You can still see for miles, even with alleys and stuff built up. And they would watch for bounty hunters. And when they would find a bounty hunter, they would capture them, they would take them to the barn, they would hang them upstairs. So lots and lots of people died upstairs in the thing. And they say that when they do tours, anyone of color that goes into the attic or the top floor of that barn starts getting really bad stomach cramps. They don't feel good. So they're thinking that the spirits of those bounty hunters who were there looking for runaway slaves really dislike anybody of color that goes up there and does the tour. We had a lot of things happen there. We had a ball of light come out of the sick room. There was an outside room that was not attached to, you couldn't get into the room any part of the house. There was a balcony that then went into the house another way, so it was kind of for quarantine. And so you would see this ball of light come out that door to where the balcony is, come up around the house and enter into another room, and then it would go up to the cupola and you would see the cupola light up. We watched this happen 4 or 5 times. It's really interesting. There's a shadow person in the barn area, male. He seems very big. A little bit creepy. I don't want to be anything negative, I'd say. Like I said, something happens. But there are other things. That night, there's one particular bed that people sleep in, and they say that there's activity that happens in the bed. And I didn't believe it. I didn't tell any of the other investigators there that night about that activity. When we go in, we don't tell any of the investigators anything that happens prior, so that whatever they get, it's untainted. There's no suggestion. So they find what they find, and then we go over the history at that point. I knew because I'd been there before, and so I kept it to myself. And I decided I wanted to sleep in that room, in that bed, which I did. And I probably won't ever sleep in that bed again. All night long, I was being touched. Woke up, something touching me. When I was sleeping, I was having awful dreams, very uncharacteristic of me. I am not a very confrontational person, but I had dreams that I was screaming and yelling at everybody in the house and feeling like I wanted to hurt them. This is not me. And so I did not have a very good night that night. I woke up very tired the next morning and decided at about, I think it was 5 in the morning, that it was time to go. So different things that happened, but something is definitely there, but it's a very interesting location, rich in history. And at one point there was a train wreck. There's train tracks not far from this house. This is why it was able to be built so grand, because they could ship all the stuff in. And it was brick, and oh, it's just beautiful. Well, there was a train wreck at one point, and they were using the home as a hospital and morgue until they could ship the people when they were well enough to go to Columbus, which is a ways away. So lots of people died in the house just from that event alone. So, and that's something we could trace in history as well. So interesting things. It's kind of neat that a lot of people who go there think the little girl who died and fell off the balcony is a little girl. But when you do the historical research, you find out she's a young adult. Yes, ma'am.
What was the name of the town again?
Trinway.
How do you spell it?
Trinway, I think. It's, okay, it's not a town. These rural houses is Trinway, and these rural houses are Dresden, and it's in between those rural houses. So it's right there next to Dresden, right next to it, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Or, sorry, are you boy?
He's too pretty.
You are, your eyes are beautiful, which the girls are just gonna fall in love as you get older.
Just totally.
A little longer ago, when you asked about running through a graveyard, you could also, your little body could also run into a big rainstorm.
You could, or a tree even. You gotta be careful. You gotta be very careful. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Over the years, my daughter and my friend and I go to haunted places, not necessarily ghost hunting per se, but going to places that are reportedly haunted.
Yes.
And my sister has a real problem with it, and she's always telling me I shouldn't do it, that
Okay.
it's not a good idea. And she told me a few weeks ago that she saw something on a cable TV show about ghost hunters, that evil things come back with them or something.
First off,
And I didn't quite know what to say. I just said, we're not trying to summon anything evil, we're just, looking at places, we're not doing anything.
yeah.
And she keeps telling me not to do it. but it's-
I have done this for many, many years, and you can reassure her. I've had one thing follow me home, and it was a little girl.
A real one?
She was real at one point, I think. Yeah, I had an experience, after we came from this place, it was also a hotel at one point, and I was asleep in my bed, and you know how you get that feeling somebody's watching you? Well, I opened my eyes, and there was this little girl dressed in, it's like a dark outer clothing, a little bit of white here, and then there was like a bow over like here. And she had long hair, but it wasn't like in braids or anything like that. So I don't know what time frame she may have came from. But when I opened my eyes, I could see her right there by me. And it was almost the expression on her face was like she was waiting for me to wake up. And when she did, she kind of jumped into bed like a child jumping into bed with their parents. At that point, I started backpedaling over the top of my husband because it really kind of freaked me out because I wasn't expecting this. And at the time when I first was watching her, it was one of those things where you're going, am I awake? Am I dreaming this? What's going on? Well, when she interacted, I knew I was awake and started trying to get because I wasn't really sure what to think of that. It's like being startled, like when you walk out and you see a snake. I can pick up a snake and hold the snake. I don't like to do so when they come out me in the woods, right? Just startling. It was just that one night and it was gone. And I just believe that she, had some affinity with me. It was nothing ever evil. I have very few times ever had anything negative happen ever that I've been. Now you're going to see a lot of that on TV because TV sells, right? But TV sells a lot of things. In fact, there is a ghost hunting show that's coming out. I don't remember the network. So Anyway, it's called Hot Chicks Who Ghost Hunt. Who wants to watch that, right? And when you see the trailer, they've got the little tank tops and the little short shorts, and they're screaming around and running around, and just, you know. So TV. What time is it? Yeah. So TV wants to sell, right? And they use whatever sells. And there are two things that sell: sex and fear, right? And so that's what she's seeing. And so she's uncomfortable with it because she's afraid, it sounds like. Not so much that there's something to be afraid of. Yes, Greg?
That's like that show I was telling you I watched the other day. Never seen it before. Kristen, remember the name of it? That lady that
The Ghost Whisperer?
would see the black entities and she, oh my God, it's so evil.
Yeah, sometimes people just go right to that. It's always evil, you know? And frankly, we don't talk about the E word or the D word because it's so few and far between.
Yeah, I ran into them several times and there's nothing.
Yeah, we've had shadow people a lot of times. Sometimes that's just how they're forming. That's all they can give us, is this kind of dark shadow. They aren't strong enough to really form a full body.
Not like in the movie Ghost.
Yeah, it's not like that. Not like Insidious or anything like that. Yes, ma'am.
Should you actually confront?
I never confront in a negative way. This is why. I don't know much about you, right? What is your name?
Ronald.
Ronald. If I ask you questions like this, you know, where are you from?
Ohio.
Ohio? Awesome. I have a friend in Ohio, actually. It's,
But I don't know where Dresden is.
you don't know where
What
that's
city is that?
It's closer to Columbus.
Okay.
Okay. But I'm getting more that way than if I had gotten in his face and started yelling at him. Talk to me. Right? Now, I might get a reaction, but it may not be something I want. I mean, he might turn on
Well,
me.
but you have to investigate that particular thing because you hear something or you see something, and you know, you're not being aggressive towards it, but you still have to find out what's.
You have to
causing it.
investigate, yes, but there are different ways. And so some of these shows, like, how many of you watched Ghost Lab on TV? It's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, we have,
Yeah, and they're always yelling and screaming at the spirits and being very, very,
I have to be very.
being very,
quiet.
very aggressive.
Trying to make them mad.
I don't think that that's necessary. I think I find out a whole lot more about people by being nice
I
than by being
ask for
nasty.
their identification when you look at.
And that's fine too. We do ask, you know, can you tell us your name? Leave some time, see if anybody, and sometimes we get names, sometimes we get dates, you know, where we get that on the recording. But, like I said, we do so with respect, because that's the most important thing. If we don't show respect, we're not gonna get respect, and I doubt we'll get any, you know, for instance, if I stood up here, hey, my name's Cher Wright, what are you all doing here? How long many of you guys would stick around? You know, you're not gonna, okay, what does this woman have to say, right? Yeah, there's the door, you're gonna go, right? Same thing with ghost hunting, you get what you put into it, you know, and it's not something you can just be negative about. Yes?
Do you think UFOs and ghosts are the same thing?
They're all underneath the title of paranormal.
I think they're the same thing.
Some people do.
What about the chicken
Paranormal is a very
short
wide topic. Underneath paranormal, you'll have UFOs and Bigfoot, cryptozoology, Mothman. All those things happen. People research them. My daughter's definitely afraid of chupacabras.
No brainer.
Personally, I'm not sure that exists, but you know, whichever. So yeah, underneath the paranormal heading, there's a lot of things, and ghosts is like this much, you know. But I mean, if you think about it, you ever all have heard the iceberg theory, you know, like you see the tip and everything underneath is a lot bigger. What we see and know about the paranormal is just that tip. All the other stuff that's hidden, we don't know that yet, and we're researching it. We're looking for those answers, and we're asking those questions. We have to ask the right questions to find the right answers. So it's a long, drawn-out process. I mean, think about things we know exist, the human brain. How much do we really know about that? Not much at all. How do brains, like when you have an infant and they have a brain injury, it's amazing how quickly other parts of the brain then takes over for that. And this is something we know exists, and we still don't understand all that. We know life happens and people have near-death experiences, but we can't explain what happens with that or why. So we have to look and ask those questions. There's so many things about the world itself we don't understand. Some people believe in past life. and and everybody living more than one life and coming back and having more experiences. Some people don't believe in that. But there are people that I've seen a show not long ago where this little boy, he was always drawing these pictures of this World War II plane. No, World War I plane. And he had some G.I. Joes, but he called them Walter and Henry. And when his mom was asking about Walter and Henry, he said, well, they're my friends. They were with me when I died. And he would sign his name. I can't think of, like if his name was Josh, and I can't think of the actual name, but he would put what?
James.
James. And he would write James 3. When his mom asked him about it, he's like 3, 4 years old. He goes, well, I've been here 3 times. And as an infant, he would lay on his back and push with his arms and legs and scream as if he was kicking and trying to get out of someplace. And he would have night terrors that lasted up until he was 7, 8, 9 years old, and he would do this where he was kicking. They decided to take him to a psychologist because our psychiatrist, they weren't sure what was going on with him. And he kept saying that, I was shot down in a plane and I died. And I'm scared. Well, then he said something, he mentioned a name, but his name was James. And that he had a sister, and he said the sister's name. Well, they found this woman who had a brother, James, who got shot down, and so he went to see her, and she's an old woman by this time. And he said, I know you. What happened to the painting that Mom painted and described the painting, and it was in her attic? What do you do with that? Now, can I honestly look at that and go, you know, I have to then explore it more. I have to do that research. But he kept saying, this is the 3rd time I'm here. I'm James 3. So it's interesting. It's also paranormal. I had another case where a woman come to me, and her daughter was about my age, and she had children. And she had breast cancer, and they didn't know how far it had metastasized. It was pretty aggressive. And so they were going in to do surgery to take out whatever was there and then to look further. And she didn't want to know. And all the way to the hospital, she kept saying, I don't want to know. Well, when she had the surgery and she came out, she never woke up. She went into a coma. About, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks, I can't remember exactly. She did finally wake up, and the hospital called her and like, she's awake, but she doesn't remember anything. And her mom's thinking, she doesn't remember anything about the surgery or about that. When she got there, she didn't remember anything. She didn't remember her children, her mother, anything. She had amnesia. She did remember who she thought she was, and she said she was Geronimo's daughter. And that she died a long time ago, and while she was on the other side, there's other planes of existence. And that you have things that you have to do. You have work you do after you've passed on, and it's work for the good of humanity. It's not like a job you have here. And that she got hung up with this woman, this girl that had the surgery, and the girl didn't want to come back, and she ended up coming back instead. And that when she died in 1965, and she was half black and half Indian, and she said Geronimo was lazy and never made a stinking thing, and he only just signed his name to stuff so white people would buy it. And she knew a lot of things that she shouldn't have known unless she was a historian. And she kept saying, if you all are going to insist on calling me Rochelle, which was the girl's name, she must call me Miss Rochelle, because I'm older than everybody here. And she said that she has work to do, and she needs to get busy, and she needs all of you people to leave her alone, so she needs to do this work. And she kept saying that everything's done on the moon. All time is based on the moon. And that by the new moon, she's going to be able to go finish her work, because she has work to do. And about the time the new moon came around, she started having seizures. And then all of a sudden, she woke up, she was Rochelle, and she had no memory of the time that she was Geronimo's daughter. Now, is that psychosis, or is that another spirit taking the place? It's very hard to tell. So it's very interesting, nonetheless. So we think about ghosts and spirits, but it's so much more. And it all comes down to personal stories and personal relationships. Yes, ma'am?
How many people are in your group?
In my group?
In this, yeah.
I have a small team. It has grown recently. 10 people, I'm going to say. About 10. I also teach classes, and we have a lot of students. I'm very, very picky about my team. I look for certain things. I don't want numbers. I want, not quantity. I want quality, right? My people, these guys, Greg and Kathy back here, they just got added to the group this year. Greg's been coming to classes for 2 years?
3.
3 years. First 2 years I called him George. I'm awful with names. His last name's George, I just messed it up. But I want to see growth, I want to get to know you, I want to make sure that everybody fits. There's no competition in my group.
Now, what I wanted to ask you was, do you notice when you go out, are there particular people that the spirits seem to be attracted to
Oh, yes.
rather than others? And why do you think that is?
I think it has a lot to do with just human nature. For instance, if you walk into a room and you feel, when you first walk in here, did you really talk to people you didn't know? Not so much. But if I had you up and getting to know each other, then you probably would. I think that the energy between people is good, that we get more activity. I think sometimes we close it off ourselves because either A, we're so worried about whether or not we're going to get something that we push things away, or we're having a busy day and we're not paying attention, or our mind's clouded, or we're fumbling with this recorder that we can't find the buttons in the dark, or whatever. I think some of us have fear that we don't even address, so it's off-putting. I think also with just personalities, there's times where you look around a room and you're in a room with people you don't know, and some people look like someone you can talk to. You strike up a conversation, you find out you have something in common, and it moves on. I found with our group, first off, the more we go to a place, the more we get, as if they're getting to know us more. Secondly, when my group has good energy amongst each other, we get more activity. So they are sensing that we're cohesive. And when we share things about ourselves, one experiment we did, we sat in a room in a parlor area and put out the recorders and everything, and I made an announcement to whomever is in this space, we're going to be talking for a while and you're welcome to join us. So we started talking about what really scares us. And I'm not talking about, movies or ghosts or chupacabras. We were talking about real life things. One guy talked about when his mother almost died of cancer and having to deal with that. Another man said when he was stationed in Germany, his 4-year-old daughter walked out of their apartment when they moved in because they couldn't find her and they didn't speak German. I talked about when she was 2, we went to Brookfield Zoo, and the big dolphin outside the dolphin place? Well, I wanted to take a picture, and it was back when you had to advance the film, right? So I had her and her older sister back there, and I had them posed by the big dolphin, and so I took a picture, I looked down to advance the film, and when I looked up, the dolphin show had let out, and I saw this mass of people. When the people walked by, she was no longer there. She found legs that looked like Mom and followed them. I was terrified that I lost her. My other one was old enough to know, hold still. I've always told them, if you get lost, just hold still, and I will find you, okay? Well, she didn't realize how literal that Ashley had taken that, because when I found her, when she finally realized that they weren't Mom's legs, I saw her by the concession area doing this. She was holding still. But we were all talking about things that we really were frightened of. Life experiences, human relationships. And all of a sudden we started getting a lot of activity, as if they were sharing in that. We saw a shadow person that on the stairway that looked like they were leaning over the banister and just kind of looking. And when I brought the attention that there was something there, I said, does anybody else see that on the banister? It went like this and stepped back. So I think it has to do with relationships. Same as on this side of life, where you see someone that you think that you could have an experience with. And so the spirits also look at us that way too. If it's a child, it might sense that you're a mom, right? And feel more comfortable, as opposed to it may not be as comfortable with a male. Or maybe a younger girl. We've gone into old prisons where they kept the juvenile male offenders, and we got nothing until I put my young daughters back there, and then things heated up. So I think it has to do with the human nature, honestly. Whatever they're attracted to, we don't have that formula yet, but we don't have that in life either. How do, it's like trying to explain why I liked you in high school at one time, and then now I'm not interested anymore, that chemistry's gone. It's kind of that same thing. So whoever you have that chemistry with, I think that's why some people experience it, some people don't. Some people just dismiss it. There's lots of times where you think you see something out of the corner of your eye and you're like, oh, my imagination, right? But sometimes it's not your imagination. So it just depends, right? Did that help at all?
No, I was just kind of curious, that's all.
Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Like you said, only one like detailed image that you saw about the little girl, but you mentioned a lot about shadow people.
Shadow people, yes.
But when I saw something, it looked like a cloud, but it was very detailed. Like I saw expression on the face, I saw
And so that was
clothes.
probably a full body apparition. Now sometimes those are solid and sometimes they're wispy.
I was just wondering about the
Yes,
differences there.
I've seen things that are solid, like I said, when I was younger, but that's few and far between,
Mhm.
okay?
And it was like the residual.
Okay, so it
He
didn't,
walked in front of a barn, like it was
It
my
didn't.
friend's Uncle Paul, great
Okay.
Uncle Paul, and he was doing chores in front of the barn. And he just walked really leisurely in front of the barn. He had overall bibs on and a hat. And I saw his expression of his face and everything.
it's awesome.
And she was next to me, and we didn't say a thing, we just went. And then we waited until we were 2 miles down the road, and I'm like, did you see that? She's like, yeah, we're talking about it.
One of the things with residual that is very often what we come across is old farmhouses that have raised children from generation to generation. And they will get little feet running up and down the steps and giggling. They're not really there. The spirits aren't really there. It's just the energy that was impressed upon the location of many, many generations of children running up and down the steps.
He would turn on his radio too. He had like an old radio that was still in the house because they got the house from them when they passed on. And it would just blare on. And she'd have to unplug it to get it to come turn off.
That's really cool.
They were never mean or negative feeling.
Most cases aren't. I mean,
They're
the
just
only time you really hear the
living
negative
still.
stories is it's always, if you notice, it'll be, well, my friend's brother's uncle's friend once had da-da-da-da happen, right? It's never, I saw this happen, this happened to me. The negative things are generally things that you hear, it's more of an urban legend type situation. You know, like my friend's uncle's friend's brother had a Ouija board and all the windows broke out of the house, you know? Really? And you still played with it? I don't think so. I think people would believe in that deep. But you know what I'm saying? It's always the things that are the most negative, the things that are the most scary, are the things that you don't hear a direct story from. Any other questions? Well, I thoroughly enjoyed having this time to meet with you. I hope you also enjoyed it. I have a website, paranormalsciences.com, and we have Facebook, so like us on Facebook. We sometimes talk back and forth, and I let everybody know what's going on at that point. So if you have any other questions, I will be here for a while. Thank you.